Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon. Thank you, John Dempsey, for your introductory remarks. And good to see you again, and Peter Bergen, and other colleagues here. We planned our trip with a short notice, and one of the first things in our mind was to be here, New America Foundation. I've been to conferences with New America Foundation since the beginning of this institute, and I've been to too many other think tank, which I see familiar, friendly faces throughout different times. At one stage it was perhaps Middle East Institute and American Academy of Diplomacy, Heritage Foundation, which were amongst the few organizations which would provide the opportunity. I'm talking about 90s, 96 to 2001, beginning of that period, where we thought at that time that Al-Qaeda was not just a threat to the people of Afghanistan, but also for the United States, and we wanted to bring awareness, and I want to thank the American people for staying with us. In the early days, before September 11th, it was American women who helped us, big deal, because of the plight of women in Afghanistan at that time under Taliban in Al-Qaeda. But since then, a lot has happened. September 11th took place, before that September the 9th, where late Commander Massoud was assassinated by Al-Qaeda. And then the engagement of the international community led by the United States. And your country, your people made big sacrifices in blood and treasure alongside our people, as a result of which lives for millions of people in our country changed for better. Better opportunities for our people, better opportunities for the people of the region. We are in 2017, and last night I was with some friends which showed me the photos of those years that I used to travel to the United States and try to garner support to see if there are doors open to make our point, not just for the sake of our own people, but for the sake of American people as well. And hundreds of thousands of Americans have served in Afghanistan in the past 15, 16 years. Lots of people made ultimate sacrifices. So I'm here to thank the American people for their support and commitment, and thank the administration, especially after the announcement of the South Asia policy. We had discussions in Kabul with Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson. Prior to that as well, General McMaster had visited us twice, and President Ghani, during his trips to New York and other places, had met with President Trump. But I thought that it is timely for me to pay a visit today, not only to thank you, but at the same time to assure our American colleagues that it is doable. While the challenges are many in terms of One is security. There are other challenges as well. At the same time, the opportunities are there in the Afghan people, in Afghan national unity government. You have a sincere and thorough partner, and the South Asia policy announcement, which came after some deliberations here in Washington, and lengthy deliberations nevertheless, but the right ones, which led to the right decision afterwards. There are things in our part, obligations in our part, that we have to do it and contribute to the success of the strategy for the sake of our people, as well as our common interest in dealing with the challenge of terrorism and violence in our country, in also taking firm steps towards reform, fighting against corruption, strengthening democratic institutions. Yourself refer to the previous elections. The future elections must be, should be, and would be better than previous elections, because we consider elections as the foundation for stability and well-being of our people. And as I speak here, I'm here in Washington. Serious steps have been taken by the Commission in order to regain the trust of the people over the process, and there will be new energy in terms of pursuit of the electoral programs, including implementation of reforms, which was the result of months of discussions amongst different stakeholders, which led to our electoral law. The Afghanistan Compact, which is the details of a strategic partnership between Afghanistan and the United States. One element is governance and democratic process, but there is economic element in it, security, and also reconciliation. And we are working on it together with our American colleagues. There is a monthly stock-taking mechanism which was agreed upon to see where we are lagging behind, where we are making progress, and where we need to bring more focus. And in South Asia, announcement of South Asia policy came as a good news. It was welcomed by our people, but in some other corners it had different reactions attached to it, which still I believe that it is an opportunity, not just for the people of Afghanistan and for the United States, to move forward with more clarity in mind, but at the same time for our region, because the threat is not just limited for our people or the American people, but it's also for the people of the region. To create conditions to prevent Taliban from not only from making advances, but rather adding pressure. So those of them which will be willing to see an opportunity for giving up violence and joining the peace process, the door should remain open for them. And this has been our message. So the promise of, or the message of reconciliation is not in any way in contradiction to our resolve to continue to fight against terrorism under any name. And at the same time, it's a reflection of the desire of our people, a majority of our people, which want to see peace in their country. And the story of Afghanistan is not just the ones that you hear it from time to time, which is, of course, that's part of the story. Unfortunately, civilian casualties and corruption, which serious steps have been taken in order to deal with the issue of corruption. At the same time, there are stories of millions of human beings, men and women, young and old children, which are rebuilding their lives and are hopeful, and they are doing so with resilience, with energy, and forward-looking manner, but at the same time cognizant of the fact that you as friends have helped us and continue to help us. I think for the introductory remarks, I suffice with this, and then continue with you, Peter. Okay? Thank you. I think I have great respect for General McChrystal. He served Afghanistan in a very difficult time. And I would say that commenting about current situation, it requires a little bit more study than just characterizing it as a deeply divided government. The governance is tricky everywhere. Yeah?
We were aware of that in Washington.
And let alone coming from a background of competing elections and in the manner that it happened in Afghanistan. So if there is one characterization of the current situation that both sides, President Ghani and myself, we both made a good decision in the formation of the unity government. That's the right decision. The other side of it would have been an endless conflict in fighting over the results, which Al-Qaeda, Daesh, Taliban, those other terrorist groups would have taken advantage of this. With this, of course, comes debates, arguments, issues, daily issues, important issues, less important issues, and perceptions about it.
What are the practical steps for the upcoming election that you think would make it more fair and less contested?
There was an electoral reform process which started, unfortunately, a bit late. These were one of the issues that were debated from time to time. It started a bit late, but we have a good electoral law at the moment. And amongst the measures which was recommended in the previous elections as well, but not implemented or not made into, turned into the law, that was the voters registration or voters list pinned to the polling centers. That's a measure that prevents massive fraud or ballot stuffing, things as such. That's already part of the law. Then there is the Election Commission of Afghanistan and the Independent Election Commission and the Elections Complaints Commission, which are in place based on the law. These days, as we speak, there are serious discussions amongst the Commission for reform and bringing changes so to regain the confidence of the public as well as the political forces, which we hope that those measures taken by the Commission which would lead to a new energy, a new impetus in order to help us get elections, parliamentary elections in 2018 better elections, more transparent elections, and also presidential elections in 2019.
August the 21st, President Trump announced the new South Asia strategy. What was your reaction to the strategy, and what did you think the big changes were from the Obama administration, and more generally, how do you think the Afghan people reacted to it?
I was amongst the first Afghans to react to it and to welcome it, and it was long-awaited policy in strategy. The fact that it's not time-bound, it is condition-based, that's an important element. The regional aspect of it has more clarity than any other time. The fact that the sanctuaries are being identified as the main part, and also
the sanctuaries in Pakistan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, sometimes it is perceived that the military security element is more prominent than the other aspects of it. I would say yes, based on the realities on the ground, additional assets and some additional forces were needed in order to create conditions for success, or create conditions or environments so Taliban are persuaded, not all of them perhaps, but a significant part of them, to come to the negotiating table. And that's a contrast with the earlier policy.
I mean, have you noticed more Taliban outreach? I think you said publicly that the Taliban have, since this new strategy was announced, have been more open to a discussion with you, or has it not really impacted that?
Two things are more evident. One is the division amongst the Taliban, or broader sense. The second thing is that, yes, in the local level, there is more outreach to the local population or local authorities. And the next part, which is again military security, Taliban have shifted. It's not a complete shift from rural operations to the urban, but they have shifted to some extent towards more operations, terrorist activities inside the cities, car bombs, truck bombs, suicidal attacks, all together. That has led to casualties. There is no doubt, unfortunate situations for people, but these are the immediate things. But in the course of time, I have no doubt in my mind that it will have more practical impacts.
If the Taliban were to come to the negotiating table, would you be open to the idea of them having governorships, provincial governorships, or district governorships, or what kind of power arrangements would you be open to?
Before getting to those details, sometimes it is expected that we lay down a roadmap with all the details of it. The first thing that Taliban come to understand is the resolve, the political will of the political leadership, unity government, which has the support of the people as well, that we are ready to talk, we are ready to negotiate. You are well familiar with another situation, which is, of course, not the same as the Taliban movement, but part of the fighting forces in Afghanistan in the past few decades. The group led by Mr. Hekmatyar. We facilitated for him to join the peaceful process. We had different opinions earlier, we continue to have differences. And a few days ago, he was holding a meeting, a big conference in a big tent, addressing his followers, and I was addressing a group of civil society and networks, women advocacy networks, that they were concerned because Mr. Hekmatyar has returned back. Perhaps some of the achievements like the right for education, political participation, freedom of speech, these things will be compromised. I assured them that this is not the price that we are ready to pay for it, because by compromising on the rights of the people, we cannot achieve peace. That's our firm belief. But at the same time, they were convinced when I told them that, look, isn't it better that somebody is speaking to his followers in a peaceful environment rather than sitting somewhere in the mountains or in a neighboring country planning to destroy Afghanistan? So there will be certain steps that that has to be taken. But the first thing is that the groups which are fighting, and hopefully increasingly more individuals and more groups are convinced that they cannot win militarily. That's the condition that the new South Asia policy has created, the environment. But at the same time, there are better chances. There are other chances. The doors are open, and we are serious about it.
There have been reports that Iran is supporting the Taliban, and even that Russia is supporting the Taliban. Do you give any credence to those reports? And if so, what does that mean?
I would say that any report as such should be taken seriously. There are countries which have other concerns and other conditions and circumstances in relations with the United States in outside world, and those conditions and circumstances sometimes affect our situation as well. But our efforts will be focused to convince more countries on the basis of an important reality. Excuse me. Normally, when somebody talks about Daesh, then I start coughing, but this time around it. Thank you. There are countries which they consider Daesh as a bigger threat. We wouldn't argue about it. We agree Daesh is a big threat. But on the ground in Afghanistan, to make a differentiation between different terrorist groups which are resorting to the same type of activities or following the same ideology, we don't agree. Well, we need to work with all those countries to recreate that consensus which existed around 2001 in regards to Afghanistan.
So at the height of the American involvement in Afghanistan, there were 90,000 American troops, and shortly there'll be 15,000. And I guess a lot of Americans sort of ask themselves, if it didn't work with 90,000, why is it going to work with 15? And so what would you say? I mean, have there been changes in the Afghan National Army or other national security forces that make this a reasonable investment?
So the earlier, the bulk of the responsibility was on the American forces or international troops. And also the withdrawal date, the announcement of the withdrawal date has created some circumstances where Taliban thought that it will be only a matter of time before they return back. They were avoiding engaging with the American troops or international troops while accumulating strength in waiting for 2014 to come. And then 2014 coincided with our elections, and there was political transition, there was military security transition, there was economic transition. The part of the war economy, which became part of the economy. Hundreds of thousands of people were directly or indirectly working under that network of support for the forces which were present there. So combination of all three came together, and Taliban were hoping that 2014, 15, they will return back big way. I mean, they will return back and rule Afghanistan. So the year 2015, most energy and resources were focused on the security situation to prevent that worst case scenario from taking place. There was another condition prior to 2014 as well. That was the status of relations between Afghan leadership and the US administration, which it will not be exaggeration that I would say that it was in its worst case ever. That also has created a lot of doubts here in Washington and a lot of disruptions within the country as well. That also changed dramatically with the formation of the unity government. Bilateral security agreement was signed just after that. And at the same time, there are a lot of lessons in the past 16 years, including on the issue of sanctuaries and the support that are provided. You might recall we had talked about it earlier when I was in a different role and you were in a different role.
Younger. Younger, a lot younger.
Young, but you're still young. And sometimes these questions, when it came to the support for Taliban and for the relevant groups, is it the institution? Is it the individual? Is it the policy? Those were the questions. These are not questions anymore. How to deal with it is the question. And if we have clarity, consistency, and coherence on how to deal with it, that will create a favorable condition for permanent solution.
Well, thank you very much, sir. We're going to open it up to questions from the audience, and we know you have relatively limited time. If you have a question, raise your hand and also wait for the microphone because we're live streaming this, and we also want to know what your affiliation is. So, Ethan, let's start with this gentleman here. It's on.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Omid. I'm an Afghan Fulbright here studying diplomacy. Yeah, it's okay now. Yeah. My question is regarding President Trump's strategy toward South Asia. Excellency, what do you think? Do you think this time this strategy is going to compel Pakistan to work honestly with Afghanistan people and its government? Thank you so much.
I think this is one element, and I'm sure that the US administration is dealing with it. There are other elements as well. There are responsibilities for us when it is called that it's not a blank check. We understand it, and our people also have not given us blank check. They want us to deliver on the serious issues, serious challenges, including corruption and governance and democratic process. In our part, we think and we believe that the announcement of the policy is an opportunity not just for Afghanistan but also for Pakistan. These groups, the terrorist groups, will not serve and have not served any country's legitimate interest. That's the key issue. That if we make mistake in our judgment in that part, we might be misled or misleading others. So it's important that to see this, the announcement of the policy as an opportunity and to focus on the real challenges, which are challenges for Pakistan, for Afghanistan, for stability and security in our region.
Just to follow up on that, Pakistan did conduct a major operation in Waziristan, as you know, 3 years ago, and obviously it was quite effective on some levels against the Pakistani Taliban. How do you assess the Pakistani military's attitude towards these groups right now, given the fact that they did do this operation, and also, of course, the Taliban have killed, you know, thousands of Pakistanis over the course of the last several years. So how would you characterize the Pakistani position on this right now?
To deal with the groups which were active in Waziristan,
Yeah.
that was the right attitude, the right action taking against those groups, and at the same time what we expected and what we continue to expect from all our neighboring countries is not to differentiate between different terrorist groups.
I hate to press you on this.
Haqqani group,
Yeah.
which was operating in those areas, they were spared, and they continue to act against the interests of Afghanistan, and they are behind most of the terrorist actions against our people as well as US and international troops. And the issue of safe havens continue to be the main issue there. And these are the areas that we need to continue to talk with our Pakistani neighbors and find a solution for it. And what we expect from our neighbors is not just to change the talking points, but to see how changes in the policy can help them and can help us and can help all together, and we are willing to be cooperative.
Brian Williams from the University of Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Sorry.
Well, welcome. And I'm also the author of a book called The Last Warlord about General Dostum. And I was wondering if you could speak about his role in the government. You know, is he in exile? Will he be allowed back? What do you personally think about his interaction with Ghani? And also the ethnic issue. You know, Dostum is an Uzbek. How do you see the future of Afghanistan with Tajiks and Pashtuns and Uzbeks as all sort of in a vortex? And a second question real quick, how do you distinguish Daesh from Taliban? Can you negotiate with Daesh? You know, for years you've been trying to negotiate with Taliban, but is Daesh too extreme for the government to actually have negotiations with? Thank you.
Okay. The first question was a little bit tricky. So, well, why aren't you writing another book? There are two issues related to what you asked. One is about an individual, one is about an ethnic group. I will separate between the two. There is a legal issue which is pending, and that will be dealt with according to the law, in the law of the country, in regards to individual or individuals. That's one issue. When it comes to the ethnic groups, you mentioned Uzbek ethnicity. It's part of that diversity of our society. And identity issues and issues of the country of that scope needs to be addressed through national policies, national strategies in the institutions, and the electoral process, for example, is an answer to that. People will be represented in the parliament, people will be represented in the government, and if there is one question in the minds of the people in regards to their future, in the efforts that they are making in shaping up their future, they want to ensure that citizens of the country have equal rights and responsibilities under the law of the country. So personally, I have committed myself, and that has been my lifetime commitment, to work for that, to aim for that. There are certain polarizations on different issues of the country. The elections also led to some polarization. These are realities of the country. But it's our duty, and the duty of the future leaders of the country, to put the interests of the country above, and side issues should not distract us from the pursuit of our national goals, and national unity amongst the people can only materialize when the system allows it in a democratic and pluralistic manner with the equal rights for the citizens. We will continue through that path.
Just to follow up.
Daesh and Taliban, there are more similarities than there are differences. The names are different, the faces are sometimes the same, brutality of tactics are sometimes the same, sometimes more brutal. We are, to be honest, we haven't given it a thought to talk to the Daesh. Nobody has an experience of dealing with such a group. So the time will show. They have lost their bases in some parts of the world, which are welcomed. They have some foothold in Afghanistan, not as broad as Taliban. In some places they are fighting against the Taliban. Taliban are fighting against them. In some places they are friends. But the rest, the future will tell.
Just to follow up on part of that, which is, did the United States make a mistake by putting too much emphasis on reconciliation with the Taliban when ultimately the real reconciliation in Afghanistan is a successful election process?
I would say that yes, the more investment should have been done on a successful electoral process. That would have helped us even in terms of reconciliation with the Taliban. That would have been another argument, another foundation to prove ourselves that we are on the right path. So more investment should have been done in terms of successful elections, but also to put the blame just on the United States. That's also, we as national leaders in whatever position, we also have had our own responsibilities.
We've got the lady in the back, Ethan, behind you. The lady in the back behind you. And then there's another lady.
So what do you have to say about the Pakistan's Joint Chief of Staff's statement, General Hayat's statement, persistent instability in Afghanistan will be compounded by giving undeserved strategic and operational space to countries which do not share a border?
Something I noticed during the Q&A that first there were only one or two questions. I said something which led to more questions afterwards. Now I see more hands raised. Without commenting on somebody's statement, I would say that whenever a country allows itself to have a right of veto over the rights of a nation or a state, the problem starts there. As now it's unity government, previous administration led by former President Karzai from 2001. It was like a country rising from the ashes of the war, trying to stand up and to walk the distance that we had missed as a result of previous occupations and also difficulties and challenges. At that stage, we started to raise hands of friendship to all countries. And there are countries who have helped Afghanistan, and we are grateful to all of them. At the same time, for a country, what we have not done and we will not do is to give the right of veto over our rights to have good and friendly relations with other countries. But at the same time, we have assured all our neighboring countries that Afghanistan's soil will not be used against them. So there is two sides in our policy, and no right of veto for any country to decide about our relations based on our national interest with other countries that we expect to be respected, and we do the same. And at the same time, we are not harboring terrorist groups or any groups that will operate from our side against the interests of another country. If there is an example of TTP, this is not our creation. It was created somewhere, and then they are operating in the areas where Taliban are operating and created that insecure environment, and they are not being backed by our institutions or supported by our institutions, while we are fighting against them as well. And we have been fighting throughout.
We know you're on a tight schedule, so the last question is going to go to Stu Braden of the Global Special Operations Foundation.
Hey, sir. Stu Braden with the Global Special Operations Foundation. Recently, Afghanistan has decided to double the size of their special operations forces. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you see that being a significant part of your national security?
Yes, special forces and special operations have been the most effective way of dealing with the Taliban and other groups. Afghanistan special forces have been raised in the past 15 years, and in the coming 3 years, the size will be doubled, and under a unified command. Sometimes, in current circumstances, there will be times that during one day they will be engaged in 4 or 5 parts of the country, effectively, focused operations, and there used to be the large-scale operations against a vast area, like the tradition in fighting and dealing with the insurgency in Afghanistan. In some cases, those were proven to be successful, but in most cases, we found that the special operations are the most effective ones, and we are proud of our security forces, defense forces, national defense and security forces. Amongst them, the special forces are the top grade.
We want to thank His Excellency, Dr. Abdullah, the Chief Executive Officer of Afghanistan, for his time today. He's on a busy schedule, so we want to let him go and get to his next important appointment. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.